Good day, everyone. Welcome to PB Tech Business's first virtual panel. Hope you're hope you're all staying positive and testing negative. We're joined with the Head of Commercial, Rodney Featherstone, to my left here, Victor Marengo, one of the BDMs at PB Tech, and our special guest, Paul Warren, our local Kiwi Microsoft insider, MVP, or most valuable professional, as he likes to be known as, and probably known to a lot of you dialing in. Today we're going to be covering a number of new Microsoft features, including Intune, Autopilot, OneDrive Profiles, and Security, and then followed by a live demonstration by Paul. And to kickstart our panel, we're going to toss over to Rodney, and he's going to cover off some device as a service offerings. And over to you.
Cool. Thank you very much, Irene. And look, we hope that the first 100, at least, if you are enjoying your lunch, got delivered today by Eat My Lunch. So they do a great job in our community, and we hope that you're enjoying that while we have today's session. The intent of today, we will keep it to 45 minutes, but we'll be here for another 15 minutes afterwards until 1 p.m. for you to be able to ask questions. And we'll put those questions to Paul after he's finished the demonstration. But we are more than happy for you to sign off and get on with your work day at 12:45 when we're completed. In regards to our device as a service, as Irene's mentioned, the reason that we just wanted to cover that off very briefly at the beginning is because the things that we're talking about today in terms of Intune, Autopilot and security are often wrapped up within our device as a service contract. The device as a service, if you need more information, can be found on PB Tech's website by searching DAAS, and that will take you to the device as a service page. And typically we have 3 tiers. The first tier is the device itself, the deployment of the device, the imaging, the asset tagging, the Intune, the Autopilot, the deployment of it out to your user base, and then at the end of the term we wipe the data, clean it all up, protect the environment, and give you a certificate of data destruction and continue on with new devices. So that's tier 1. Tier 2, we also join it to your domain if you need us to do that. We then install an agent on that that gives you reporting over the utilization of your device, and we can also manage your Intune programs as part of that. The third one can also include help desk support, so we can fully manage your user base around their end user devices. So whether it be tier 1, tier 2 or tier 3, there's a lot of functionality and management that you can pick and choose from. So Victor is going to very quickly run through a few examples of that and give you more detail on what that can happen for you.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great overview of the device as service. So for a lot of clients and organizations, they already know that our device as service is a component of hardware and services delivered to our clients via OPEX model, so they can break down the expenditure along the months and pay for that on a monthly basis, right? It's a very flexible solution that we offer. So even though we have 3 different tiers of services available, you can have a mix of that that will suit your business, right? So the idea is to work with the client on a solution that will fit their operations and their business and support them on doing and focusing on their what they do best, which is the business that they are looking after. So a couple of interesting cases around this is one of our clients, which is one of the most trusted brands in New Zealand, a healthcare provider company, and they required a bespoke customization of the assets before we ship them out. They also required extensive warehousing and logistic management to be able to suit their critical operations in New Zealand. So we worked with them and included services that were not available on the different tier pillars that we had, right? So we can work with you and work on a custom tier for your business. Another really interesting case is a couple of organizations that wanted to make use of the device as services, but they wanted to keep on remaining procuring the hardware, the assets via CapEx model. So we are sort of reverse engineering the device service, delivering them the service, but they can keep on doing what they've been doing and what's been working for them, right? On all the cases, on majority of our contracts, we run what we call also one really core value add from PBTech, which is a trading capability. So we work with the client on the right hardware, the right asset for them, and then on that process, we offer them a buyback on their existing hardware, right? So by buying back these or trading in, we help lower the overall cost of the solution, or we can simply refund their money to a bank account if they are happy to invoice us for it. So reach out if you really want to talk about that, and this is really something that we can tailor for your operation in particular.
Excellent. Thanks, Victor. So on to the guts of today's session. This is the Microsoft Stack and the Microsoft 365, particularly focused around Intune and Autopilot. We've got 4 overview things that we're going to be covering off today with Paul. One of those is Intune and the management of your devices. One is Autopilot, which is the deployment of devices. One is OneDrive for Business and how that can work with profile management. And the 4th one is security and the new security features that are included with the E5 Microsoft 365 SKU in particular. So I'll hand over now to Paul. We're going to have some time here on the couch and then move into a demonstration of the product so you can see them in action. So we'd encourage you to write some questions in the Teams meeting there, and we'll go through some questions at the end from the audience. So, Paul.
Cool. Well, I guess we could probably touch on the top 5 items that Intune would probably the value add there. So I guess if we're talking Intune, we're talking these devices that are becoming cloud managed. And in the current climate of the global pandemic, cloud managing devices has become more and more important. In fact, it's probably quite critical now. The next thing is that Intune it does device management, but it does multi-platform device management. So we're not just talking about Windows. You've also got your Mac operating system, you've got your iOS, and you've got your Android. So, or you've got people in the organization accessing organizational data on devices that the organization has bought, be they iPhones, etc. You can now start managing and securing those. And the next one is conditional access. So one thing you can do is you can link conditional access with Intune, so you can have a number of what's called compliance policies on your devices. And if those devices become not compliant, you can actually start taking action in terms of blocking access to your corporate data on those devices. Another option is infrastructure. So Intune is a cloud managed service, so we're talking, you can start reducing the footprint for infrastructure. And the last one that I think is really one of the key bits of Intune is app protection policies for Windows, iOS, and Android. And that is basically you take a scenario where you've got people in your organization who are not using organizational devices, but they want to access email, OneDrive data, SharePoint data. And being able to access that on their personal device is fantastic, right? It provides that wonderful flexibility, but looking the other side, the security side of it, how do you secure that data? Well, with an app protection policy, you can actually almost containerize that data just for the specific user on that device, and that data is encrypted, it's safe, and say they lose that device in an Uber or the employee leaves the organization, the organization is confident that, hey, that data is now safe.
So how does that look to the user? So say I come and join your organisation. I've got Outlook on my machine and Excel, and I've got my spreadsheet of my kitchen recipes, and I've got Outlook with all my Gmails and whatever email.
Yep.
And then you sort of put me into the company scheme. How does that look to me as the user? And then what happens when I leave?
Sure. So app protection policies is identity based. So when you open up your home laptop, you've got Windows running, you're running Office, you connect in, you sign into your email for your work, and what it does is those apps are enlightened to know that, hey, this particular identity and the assets in that identity are now wrapped in this app protection policy. Intune then says, hey, we're going to encrypt just this piece of information and protect only that. So you can have your other email accounts around that, but they're not touched at all. So it's completely separate. There's no device management, so employees don't have to worry about, hey, am I being spied on or anything like that. And it just secures that one piece of data. And then, yeah, like I said, when the employee finishes up at their organization, if that data is still present on their machine because it's encrypted, they won't be able to access it.
So next question regarding Intune in particular. I know you've worked at Auckland City Council in the past and you're now working with Tower. It's all very well for the 1,000-seat organisations in New Zealand, and you've even spoken to Microsoft where the numbers are much, much larger in the States. How does that scale down to the New Zealand business? If you had, say, 10 staff, would you bother or would you just not bother? What's the lower limit in your opinion?
Definitely. I mean, I would go as low as 10 or even 5. It's really how much does that organisation want to have a real hands-on with their IT. You know, you may not want to be constantly creating an image for your device, or you know, the security side of things has to be factored in. You know, you want that confidence that, hey, if I put some protection policies in, and we just tell people to go and use their own phones when they're out and about, you know that, hey, I'm safe. So, you know, Intune really is a product for, you know, like I say, the many tens of thousands, but it really does scale right down to, you know, just a handful of people in a small company.
Excellent. Well, let's move on to Autopilot now. At PB Tech, incidentally, part of the Autopilot function is that you need a hardware hash, and then that introduces it into your Intune and Autopilot. Paul's going to go through the mechanics of that. But at PB Tech, we've got a SKU that you can purchase alongside your device, which essentially enables our assembly plant to take that hardware hash and either implement it ourselves through our own managed services offering into your tenant, or we can give you the hardware hash for you to put your device into your Autopilot. So, Paul, why don't you talk us through the mechanics of Autopilot?
Okay, so essentially what Autopilot is it's the ability for someone literally to take a laptop out of the box, open it up, and just get the straight out of standard Microsoft out of box window, and just go through and then authenticate with your company account, and then it starts joining it to your company tenant, and then applying profiles and policy, deploying applications, and becomes a ready-to-use functional business device, say, within about an hour. And one of the key components of that is the real key to actually join it all together is the hardware hash on the device. So every Windows 10 device has the unique hardware hash that no other device in the world has. And once that hardware hash is imported into your tenant, it will always know that that device belongs to this tenant. And even when you reset the device, Windows 10 will reach out at first boot and say, hey, does this belong to anybody? And then Azure comes back and says, yes, it belongs to this tenant, and then it switches you over into those screens when you start logging on.
Do you need to have a Windows Pro device?
Yeah, you need, so the minimum for Windows Autopilot is Windows 10 Professional, and Windows 10 Enterprise, and Windows 10 Education.
Okay. We're going to cover off some examples and show you what it looks like when you boot into a device with Autopilot later on in the session. Next thing is the OneDrive and the profile. So we've been hearing things about Microsoft that you have got a spreadsheet that's open, you drop your coffee on your machine, you blow it up, and you know, what do? You need to get your spreadsheet back. So Paul, why don't you talk us through how you can use Microsoft's tools to deliver that service?
Sure, definitely. So moving forward into a more modern managed environment, you know, a lot of organizations have an H drive where, you know, it's on an on-premise server. That's where your documents are all stored. The idea of OneDrive for Business is you migrate that data, and as a partner, you know, you can engage Fast Track from Microsoft for your clients to help with that. You migrate that data into OneDrive for Business. So what happens with OneDrive for Business is the user just doesn't see any difference whatsoever. So you configure Intune with some profiles that will say, hey, normally in the old days, you would just folder redirect certain folders to an on-premise server. Essentially the same thing, you just folder redirecting to OneDrive. So no matter what happens to that device, those documents become available anytime you're on board a new device.
If a user is determined to save their very important spreadsheet on their desktop, can you synchronize your desktop back to OneDrive for Business?
Absolutely. One of the known folders that that gets synchronized is the desktop. So it will always do that. So I've often used the scenario when explaining known folder move and OneDrive for Business is, hey, and it's a bit silly, I guess, in the age of COVID, talking about your CEO being in Sydney, but let's just pretend your CEO's going to Sydney and he's, you know, an hour away from giving a very important presentation, and his machine just dies completely. So then he rings up support people. All you do is just say, okay, cool, no problems. Go to PB Tech, purchase a device off the shelf, just get that device off the shelf, and then onboard it through Autopilot, and then boom, the machine comes up, that presentation is available to the CEO, and he's away and running, and he or she is away and running, and you've saved the day.
That's great. And I guess one of the things I want you to show us later on in that Autopilot is how quickly you can make it or how slow you can make it. If you've got 500 apps, then it could take weeks for you to download them all. But if the CEO needs PowerPoint for his presentation immediately, then you can shrink that onboarding time.
And you've also got the option of jumping on office.com, the online version, and because your identity is connected to that, the presentation is available on the web version of PowerPoint.
Excellent. Okay, so the last one is Microsoft's Security Stack. So I think we were talking about a little bit earlier that in the past, Microsoft, in my opinion, and reputationally at least, has been a bit average regarding security. You've always had Windows Defender, which you'd only sort of trust to your child's laptop, but not an enterprise model. PB Tech, of course, over the years have made many sales regarding, Palo Alto, Fortinet, Trend Micro, Symantec, all of the popular and robust enterprise level security suites. And now, of course, in the E5 CALs, we've got Microsoft's 2 different layers of protection. So I know you've used those. How good are they? What do they do? What's different about Microsoft Security Stack now than it used to be 5 years ago? And can it realistically be trusted at an enterprise level?
Sure. I guess the key thing, once you start introducing an E5 SKU, the Security E5 or the full E5, Windows Defender on the desktop then gets transformed into Windows Defender for Endpoints ATP, the Advanced Threat Protection side of it. So that then means it starts leveraging the Microsoft Cloud in terms of zero-day threats, and it starts really becoming quite a very powerful detection and response tool. It really helps with preventing that malware attacks, the ransomware side of things, and it's recently been up in that Magic Quadrant for Gartner. So it really is a enterprise quality solution.
So by taking on the E5 CALs, which is about $86 a month per user, you're also saving on some of the costs around your previously.
Yeah, you can start scanning back on your desktop antivirus. It also provides things like Defender for Office 365, so it can start scanning mailboxes, provide safe links. So it really is it can be quite a comprehensive solution for protection.
Okay, well, we need to start taking it a bit more seriously than we have in the past decades.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Right, well, let's crack into the demonstration then, and give you some time to go through and show us at the table there about how this thing works.
Get on over.
Okay, so what we have here is Intune in a nutshell. So what I'll probably start with is let's just go over to one of the demo VMs and kind of show, hey, that this is one way to get the hardware hash. You just run a PowerShell command, and then we'll just output that to the C drive. But hey, you want to get that into your tenant. But hey, what does the hardware hash look like? This is what the hardware hash looks like. So you can kind of sense that, hey, yes, this jumble of letters and numbers is very, very unique to this device only. Alrighty, so let's look at the enrollment side of things. So I'll start off with, for every Autopilot deployment, you're going to need a deployment profile. So that looks like this. So with a deployment profile, you have a number of options you can configure. So you can have, various different options, whether you want to, the majority of them will be user-driven, but you might want a self-driven for kiosks, whether you're joining to straight Azure AD or you're doing some hybrid Active Directory joining. And obviously, most people would probably want the user account type. That would be standard, but for this purpose, we'll do administrator. And this deployment profile gets deployed to this Azure Active Directory group here. One of the key things around this Azure Active Directory group is I'm using a dynamic group. So every Autopilot object that gets uploaded into your Intune environment has an attribute associated to it. What this means is that any time when you upload a hardware hash up into Intune, it sees this attribute and dynamically assigns this profile to it. You can go through and have various different profiles, etc., but for the purpose of this demo, we'll just keep it simple. So next, I want to show you the enrollment status page. So in here, this is really what this is what you configure the user to see during the onboarding process. So you can start setting, values like timeout values. You can have some error message information here. This is a really great place to put your support phone numbers in here in case something goes wrong. And what Rodney spoke about earlier around the, if you've got 50 devices, this section here, block device until these required apps are installed. What this does is it will only allow the device to be released from Autopilot once these specific applications are installed. So you can literally have your 50 applications, but if you need that experience for the user to have Office and Edge and the company portal installed, then this is where you would set that. All right. And I guess here is all the Autopilot devices. So if you were to upload a hash, you'd import, you would go looking for it. So downloads, got demo 3. So I would import that. Now it can take up to 15 minutes to import this, so I won't do that for now. But once it's in there, you get these ability to, change the device name. So once it does onboard, if you've got a naming convention, this is where you would set that. And if you're using group tags, which is something that's really, really useful, but we don't have time to go into, that's where you can set that. All right. So because we're limited for time, I've got a few screenshots of the onboarding process, as well as switching to the live demo side with a VM. So normally when you get a machine out of the box, you get it with, okay, select your region. So you would click New Zealand. If you choose a different keyboard layout, you would choose that. And then if you need to add a second keyboard layout. So then the device goes through and does some, reaches out. This is where it reaches out, says, hey, do I belong to anyone? Yes, no. In this case, it does. And then you end up with a screen that looks like this, where the user can now just start onboarding the device with their email address. So switching to the actual live demo machine here, and so if I put in my username, so we want to click next, and then we put in the password correctly. And I've actually turned off my phone for this presentation, so the MFA side of things, let's do that properly. So what it does is it also reaches out and with multi-factor authentication needs to validate that, hey, the user is actually who they say they are. So I didn't think ahead in time, and I've actually turned off my phone. So normally I'd get a prompt on my phone, I'd just accept that, and then off we go through the process. So this is the part where it will now start onboarding the device. It does a bit of device preparation work, and then it moves into the device setup where you can have your security policies come down, certificates, network connections, and of course the applications. And because there's offices involved, that would probably take longer than I have left available. So let's just go through that. If you've got security baselines or app locker policies being applied to your device, which I'm sure most of you will, you then get a log-on screen where the user would just go through, log on with username and password, and then the device starts onboarding again, and it goes through the account setup phase where if there are any configurations associated with the user account or applications being deployed in the user context, this is where that would happen. And then the user is presented with their desktop ready to rock and roll. So let's just switch over to demo 2. So this is demo 2, which has gone through those exact steps. So I'll just log on. Alrighty, shouldn't take too long. So what we'll be able to see is once we've logged onto this device, there it is. We've got a custom desktop, corporate imagery. You can configure a start menu, which you lay out the applications that your people would most likely use. And then here what we have is OneDrive has immediately connected to the user's OneDrive without any password required, and it's automatically redirected those known folders such as documents, desktop, etc. So you've got your super important document that the CEO needs to look at, and boom, there it is. Okay, it's a notepad, but hey. So that's really Autopilot in a nutshell. We can look at some other things like the app deployments. So in Intune, we've got your applications. Here we go here. You can see the Windows applications that can be installed that you've put into your tenant. And there's also compliance policies for devices. So you can see, hey, we need a minimum operating system version. Device needs to be encrypted. You've got a password compliance, so users just can't start using weak passwords. And then you've got a lot of configuration profiles. Here's, for instance, the OneDrive. This profile here configures OneDrive to automatically connect and move those known folders into OneDrive, and so the user just seamlessly starts using that.
Well, we have a question. Can Autopilot be used to get rid of bloatware on a computer, or just add stuff?
So
we'll need to repeat the question probably.
Yeah, this is a question that I've encountered in a lot of different places. There's a number of ways you can deal with bloatware. You can, there are some scripts out there and some in the community GitHubs where it can search for bloatware and remove it. There's also the fresh start option in Windows for resetting Windows without the shall we say value-added software that some vendors put on. And but that again is that's that weighing up of IT handling the device versus getting the device out to the person who needs it. So yeah, with Intune as well, you can also see a hardware inventory the software inventory on the device, and you can start making some calls on how to get rid of software that way. Alrighty. But yeah, so essentially you've got an environment now where you've got devices that have, they've got profiles and security policies deployed to them. They've got applications deployed to them. They're getting patched. We've got Intune patches quite well. So yeah, that is it. So I'll hand back to Rodney on the couch.
Thanks very much, Paul. We've got a few questions, and so thank you very much for sending them through. We'll run through a few now, but feel free to ask some more. One of the questions was, if you're deploying a laptop with Autopilot and the battery runs out halfway through and it dies, I'm sure Microsoft has thought of this. Does it all just kick back into life when you start it up again?
Yeah, I've had scenarios where I've tested that and it does pick up, sees what apps have been deployed, and more often than not actually does continue where it's left off.
Yep.
And you get to a point where the device is then registered in Intune, so if anything is not quite right in terms of that deployment, the administrator can just go onto that device and hit the wipe button. That will trigger the wipe reset window back to the PB, and the user can onboard, hopefully with either a full battery or their computer plugged in.
Excellent. Now we've got a more honest question. One of our participants here has suggested that Intune is just a cloud version of SCCM, which was pretty rubbish to start with, and considers, is it any better? Well, firstly, was SCM as rubbish as our user puts forward from your perspective, having worked with a few of them? Yeah,
so I've worked with the variations back when it was known as SMS 1.2 back in the 90s. So I've had over 20 years of experience with it. It is a very complex, large beast, and if you can find yourself in a world of pain with it, but it is extremely powerful. And I myself, I'm speaking from my own personal experience, I'm a big fan of Config Manager. It's a great tool, but Intune, I think, takes things to the next level, opening up the cloud management side of it. So, and that's where you can start, leveraging both of them if you wanted to. So you can do a little bit of Config Manager and a little bit of Intune. But yeah, no, I mean, a lot of the features in Intune are, a lot of those Intune features, yes, app deployment, same as Config Manager in a way. Operating system deployment with Autopilot. Similar, but not really the same because you're not using a deploying an image.
Okay. Next question. I've got 100 computers in the wild, all around the country, and I decide, yes, I'm going to jump on the Microsoft bandwagon and go to Intune. What's the process for getting all your PCs in there? Is that simple, easy peasy? Yeah, how does it work?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if they're already in use out there in the field, say if they're already in Active Directory, I guess the first step is to get them hybrid Azure AD joined, and then there's group policy available to silently get them enrolled into Intune. There's also manual processes as well to if that's not the environment you've got, you can manually enroll them into Intune as well. So yeah, there are various ways to get them in there. But
And look, for the benefit of the viewers here, PB Tech can certainly help you migrate you into the Intune environment, no question. But just for those that want to do it themselves, how long would you expect setting up Intune to take for say a business with 90 PCs?
Okay, so I guess you start out with obviously scoping the requirements, but if it's say you chop it up into little bits and pieces, so you go, okay, our focus is we want to onboard with Autopilot to start with. That's one of the most easiest things you can do. So you would build those deployment profiles, license the users with their ENX E3 or their M365 E3 or the business premium SKUs, and then so you can just start that little piece of work relatively quickly. So I wouldn't think it would take more than a few weeks to get that into production.
Excellent. So one of the other questions was what Microsoft licenses are required for you to use Intune, and Autopilot, of course, being a part of Intune. So the answer to that question is Business Premium, or one of the E3, E5 SKUs from Microsoft 365. So Business Premium from memory is $28 per user per month. E3 is around 30-ish, and E5 is around 86. So E5 is a big step up, but it gives you the security components as well as Power BI and a whole lot. So I'd encourage you to certainly email me or one of the team here, just Rodney at pbtech.co.nz, and we can show you where to go on the Microsoft site to find out what SKU is correctly approved for you. Is there any gotchas in a migration from SCCM to Intune?
Well, I guess there are always gotchas in migrations. And again, I mean, I have to use the depends word again.
Yep.
So it's really around how you want things to look going forward. Are you going from, okay, we're going to go from Config Manager to Intune and nothing in between? Are we going to kind of tenant attach and have some co-management going? So really it's really a case of you just have to kind of apply things in small stages to see what is your end destination and then work your way back.
Okay, one more question, actually a few more questions, but can you use Autopilot by itself and forget about Intune?
So I mean, Autopilot is in Intune, so you need that, but you don't have to have the application deployment, integration profiles, etc., etc., etc. So you can just say, hey, I want to have a scenario where I want to onboard all my devices, all my Active Directory joined devices. I don't want to do any more imaging. I don't want to use things like NDT or anything like that. So yes, you can start using Autopilot to onboard those. There's an Active Directory connector in Intune that can basically connect into your on-premise Active Directory and can broker that creation of the computer object inside your AD. And
Excellent. Last one in regards to security. We've got a question here from a user that uses SMX to do their mail filtering and mail protection. And the question is, if they were to jump into the security features of the E5 code in particular, can they ditch that? Does it do any spam controls and all of those?
I believe it does. I'm not overly strong in that area, but I have had conversations with people in the industry around, yes, they're looking at the M365 E5 licensing to start doing that. The good thing about M365, it's always ever evolving. So whilst some things may not be mature enough today, as time progresses in the next month or two, something new will be switched on or enabled by Microsoft that will start being able to do those.
Excellent. Fantastic. That's all I've got. Irene, have you got any other questions to add?
Sure, we've had a few more. What is the easiest way, the least manual input required, to patch third-party apps using Intune?
Third-party apps. That can be quite difficult, depending on. So, Intune leverages Windows Update for Business. So quite often the easiest way would be to look at there are third-party tools out there. HMyPC is one. I think Automox might be one as well, where you can integrate that into Intune and can start patching those third-party products.
And
We've got another question here just regarding mapping of network drives and over to a SharePoint folder. You'd use Intune to deliver that mapping and those settings?
Yeah, so I guess it depends on where you are in your journey to digital transformation. If you're still using Mac drives, then things are a little bit more tricky. You need to kind of rely more on scripts. But if you start shifting your data into SharePoint Online, then built into Intune, you've got some ADM-expect policy where you can start automatically connecting in File Explorer users to their document libraries, and they can start accessing through the OneDrive clients. So you can also start using things like Files on Demand technology in OneDrive, so you're not filling up a user's hard disk with everything in their document library. It's you can choose.
I know you've worked in organisations before that have taken the G drive and moved to SharePoint and OneDrive for Business. How have you seen that done well and seen that done poorly in terms of taking the users with you? If little old Jimmy likes saving stuff to his G drive and now he's got this magical SharePoint thing, how have you seen the transition being done well?
So first up, the user education is the most critical component of digital transformation. It's very easy, and I've been guilty of it in the past, of being, the IT professional who just jumps in and says, hey, rah, 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 here's all the new technology, this is amazing, we're going to love it, boom, boom, boom. It's got all these features, and I'm going to light them all up, and there we go, and the business goes, it makes no sense to me, I really only want this and this. So really getting into the business and having those conversations, sitting with those people, not users, but people, actual real people, and getting an idea of what their day is like, and saying, hey, what are the things that really annoy you about your device, and what are the things that you really, really like? And then you start kind of that agile iteration, prototype with a small squad, experiment really, and then start building that MVP product and roll it out to the rest of the organization. So it's really building that user engagement, talking to people. That's the key to any digital transformation.
Last question here before we sign off. You talked about the roaming, the application security. So running the scenario where I've got OneDrive for Business on my laptop, I've saved all my customer details and all my pricing files and all my ERP system and all my business critical information on my device, and then I quit and run off, and it's I wanted to email a copy of my customer data to myself so I can kind of steal all the company data when I leave. Mm-hmm. And you've been able to do that for many, many years with this sort of G drive scenario. It sounds to me like there's Microsoft's new tools give a lot more protection to the business around that. Is now the time to really get into you know,
Absolutely, absolutely. You really want to, just with some basic app protection policies, it's what I call real low-hanging fruit. Getting that switched on. It's a simple case of, hey, just select just a small number of people in your organization and turn it on for them. I very highly suggest, the executives as well, the second group of people, and then, just start seeing how it works for them. So yes, you want to really secure that data, but security and usability, it's always been that kind of, you can have one but not the other. With these protection policies, you can now go, hey, I've secured this data in this organization, but it's very, very usable. The person on the phone accessing SharePoint doesn't actually notice a difference in terms of, I have to decrypt something or put a key in or put my password in 100 million times. So it becomes more and more seamless.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much, Paul. And look, thank you for joining us. We hope that those of you that got to eat my lunch, have enjoyed it. Really appreciate you signing in and hearing us today. Now's the time to sign off. So we really appreciate you joining us. We will be in touch with another one coming up shortly. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.